Welcome back to Classic Literature Free Audiobooks. If you missed previous chapters, you can find the full playlist in the description. Now, let the story continue with a journey to the center of the earth. Chapter 41. Hunger. Hunger, prolonged, is temporary madness. The brain is at work without its required food, and the most fantastic notions fill the mind. Hitherto, I had never known what hunger really meant. I was likely to understand it now. And yet, 3 months before, I could tell my terrible story of starvation, as I thought it. As a boy, I used to make frequent excursions in the neighborhood of the professor's house. My uncle always acted on system, and he believed that, in addition to the day of rest and worship, there should be a day of recreation. In consequence, I was always free to do as I liked on a Wednesday. Now, as I had a notion to combine the useful and the agreeable, my favorite pastime was birds nesting. I had one of the best collections of eggs in all the town. They were classified and under glass cases. There was a certain wood, which, by rising at early morn and taking the cheap train, I could reach at 11 in the morning. Here I would botanize or geologize at my will. My uncle was always glad of specimens for his herbarium and stones to examine. When I had filled my wallet, I proceeded to search for nests. After about 2 hours of hard work, I one day sat down by a stream to eat my humble but copious lunch. How the remembrance of the spiced sausage, the wheaten loaf, and the beer made my mouth water now. I would have given every prospect of worldly wealth for such a meal. But to my story. While seated thus at my leisure, I looked up at the ruins of an old castle at no great distance. It was the remains of an historical dwelling, ivy-clad, and now falling to pieces. While looking, I saw 2 eagles circling about the summit of a lofty tower. I soon became satisfied that there was a nest. Now, in all my collection, I lacked eggs of the native eagle and the large owl. My mind was made up. I would reach the summit of that tower or perish in the attempt. I went nearer and surveyed the ruins. The old staircase, years before, had fallen in. The outer walls were, however, intact. There was no chance that way, unless I looked to the ivy solely for support. This was, as I soon found out, futile. There remained the chimney, which still went up to the top, and had once served to carry off the smoke from every story of the tower. Up this I determined to venture. It was narrow, rough, and therefore the more easily climbed. I took off my coat and crept into the chimney. Looking up, I saw a small, light opening, proclaiming the summit of the chimney. Up I went, for some time using my hands and knees after the fashion of a chimney sweep. It was slow work, but there being continual projections, the task was comparatively easy. In this way I reached halfway. The chimney now became narrower. The atmosphere was close, and at last, to end the matter, I stuck fast. I could ascend no higher. There could be no doubt of this, and there remained no resource but to descend and give up my glorious prey in despair. I yielded to fate and endeavored to descend. But I could not move. Some unseen and mysterious obstacle intervened and stopped me. In an instant, the full horror of my situation seized me. I was unable to move either way, and was doomed to a terrible and horrible death, that of starvation. In a boy's mind, however, there is an extraordinary amount of elasticity and hope, and I began to think of all sorts of plans to escape my gloomy fate. In the first place, I required no food just at present, having had an excellent meal, and was therefore allowed time for reflection. My first thought was to try and move the mortar with my hand. Had I possessed a knife, something might have been done, but that useful instrument I had left in my coat pocket. I soon found that all efforts of this kind were vain and useless, and that all I could hope to do was to wriggle downwards. But though I jerked and struggled and strove to turn, it was all in vain. I could not move an inch, one way or the other, and time flew rapidly. My early rising probably contributed to the fact that I felt sleepy and gradually gave way to the sensation of drowsiness. I slept and awoke in darkness, ravenously hungry. Night had come, and still I could not move. I was tight-bound and did not succeed in changing my position an inch. I groaned aloud. Never since the days of my happy childhood, when it was a hardship to go from meal to meal without eating, had I really experienced hunger. The sensation was as novel as it was painful. I began now to lose my head and to scream and cry out in my agony. Something appeared, startled by my noise. It was a harmless lizard, but it appeared to me a loathsome reptile. Again I made the old ruins resound with my cries, and finally so exhausted myself that I fainted. How long I lay in a kind of trance or sleep I cannot say, but when again I recovered consciousness it was day. How ill I felt, how hunger still gnawed at me, it would be hard to say. I was too weak to scream now, far too weak to struggle. Suddenly I was startled by a roar. "Are you there, Henry?" said the voice of my uncle. "Are you there, my boy?" I could only faintly respond, but I also made a desperate effort to turn. Some mortar fell. To this I owed my being discovered. When the search took place, it was easily seen that mortar and small pieces of stone had recently fallen from above. Hence my uncle's cry. "Be calm," he cried. "If we pull down the whole ruin, you shall be saved." They were delicious words, but I had little hope. Soon, however, about a quarter of an hour later, I heard a voice above me at one of the upper fireplaces. "Are you below or above?" "Below," was my reply. In an instant a basket was lowered with milk, a biscuit, and an egg. My uncle was fearful to be too ready with his supply of food. I drank the milk first, for thirst had nearly deadened hunger. I then, much refreshed, ate my bread and hard egg. They were now at work at the wall. I could hear a pickaxe. Wishing to escape all danger from this terrible weapon, I made a desperate struggle, and the belt, which surrounded my waist and which had been hitched on a stone, gave way. I was free, and only escaped falling down by a rapid motion of my hands and knees. In 10 minutes more, I was in my uncle's arms, after being 2 days and nights in that horrible prison. My occasional delirium prevented me from counting time. I was weeks recovering from that awful starvation adventure, and yet what was that to the hideous sufferings I now endured? After dreaming for some time, and thinking of this and other matters, I once more looked around me. We were still ascending with fearful rapidity. Every now and then the air appeared to check our respiration, as it does that of aeronauts when the ascension of the balloon is too rapid. But if they feel a degree of cold, in proportion to the elevation they attain in the atmosphere, we experienced quite a contrary effect. The heat began to increase in a most threatening and exceptional manner. I cannot tell exactly the mean, but I think it must have reached 122 degrees Fahrenheit. What was the meaning of this extraordinary change in the temperature? As far as we had hitherto gone, facts had proved the theories of Davy and of Lidenbrock to be correct. Until now, all the peculiar conditions of refractory rocks, of electricity, of magnetism, had modified the general laws of nature and had created for us a moderate temperature. For the theory of the central fire remained, in my eyes, the only explainable one. Were we, then, going to reach a position in which these phenomena were to be carried out in all their rigor, and in which the heat would reduce the rocks to a state of fusion? Such was my not unnatural fear, and I did not conceal the fact from my uncle. My way of doing so might be cold and heartless, but I could not help it. If we are not drowned or smashed into pancakes, and if we do not die of starvation, we have the satisfaction of knowing that we must be burned alive. My uncle, in presence of this brusque attack, simply shrugged his shoulders and resumed his reflections. whatever they might be. An hour passed away, and except that there was a slight increase in the temperature, no incident modified the situation. My uncle at last, of his own accord, broke silence. "Well, Henry, my boy," he said, in a cheerful way, "we must make up our minds." "Make up our minds to what?" I asked, in considerable surprise. "Well, to something. We must at whatever risk recruit our physical strength. If we make the fatal mistake of husbanding our little remnant of food, we may probably prolong our wretched existence a few hours, but we shall remain weak to the end." "Yes," I growled, "to the end. That, however, will not keep us long waiting." "Well, only let a chance of safety present itself. Only allow that a moment of action be necessary. Where shall we find the means of action if we allow ourselves to be reduced to physical weakness by inanition? When this piece of meat is devoured, uncle, what hope will there remain unto us? None, my dear Henry, none. But will it do you any good to devour it with your eyes? You appear to me to reason like one without will or decision, like a being without energy." "Then," cried I, exasperated to a degree which is scarcely to be explained, "you do not mean to tell me that you have not lost all hope?" "Certainly not," replied the professor with consummate coolness. "You mean to tell me, uncle, that we shall get out of this monstrous subterranean shaft. While there is life, there is hope. I beg to assert, Henry, that as long as a man's heart beats, as long as a man's flesh quivers, I do not allow that a being gifted with thought and will can allow himself to despair. What a nerve! The man placed in a position like that we occupied must have been very brave to speak like this." "Well," I cried, "what do you mean to do?" "Eat what remains of the food we have in our hands. Let us swallow the last crumb. It will bell, heaven willing, our last repast. Well, never mind. Instead of being exhausted skeletons, we shall be men." "True," muttered I in a despairing tone. "Let us take our fill." "We must," replied my uncle with a deep sigh. "Call it what you will." My uncle took a piece of the meat that remained, and some crusts of biscuit which had escaped the wreck. He divided the whole into 3 parts. Each had 1 pound of food to last him as long as he remained in the interior of the earth. Each now acted in accordance with his own private character. My uncle, the professor, ate greedily, but evidently without appetite, eating simply from some mechanical motion. I put the food inside my lips, and hungry as I was, chewed my morsel without pleasure and without satisfaction. Hans, the guide, just as if he had been eider-down hunting, swallowed every mouthful as though it were a usual affair. He looked like a man equally prepared to enjoy superfluity or total want. Hans, in all probability, was no more used to starvation than ourselves, but his hardy Icelandic nature had prepared him for many sufferings. As long as he received his 3 riksdollars every Saturday night, he was prepared for anything. The fact was, Hans never troubled himself about much except his money. He had undertaken to serve a certain man at so much per week, and no matter what evils befell his employer or himself, he never found fault or grumbled, so long as his wages were duly paid. Suddenly my uncle roused himself. He had seen a smile on the face of our guide. I could not make it out. "What is the matter?" said my uncle. "Skeedum," said the guide, producing a bottle of this precious fluid. We drank. My uncle and myself will own to our dying day that hence we derived strength to exist until the last bitter moment. That precious bottle of Hollands was in reality only half full, but under the circumstances it was nectar. It took some minutes for myself and my uncle to form a decided opinion on the subject. The worthy professor swallowed about half a pint and did not seem able to drink any more. "Fortreflig," said Hans, swallowing nearly all that was left. "Excellent, very good," said my uncle, with as much gusto as if he had just left the steps of the club at Hamburg. I had begun to feel as if there had been one gleam of hope. Now all thought of the future vanished. We had consumed our last ounce of food, and it was 5 o'clock in the morning. Next chapter, chapter 42, The Volcanic Shaft. Man's constitution is so peculiar that his health is purely a negative matter. No sooner is the rage of hunger appeased than it becomes difficult to comprehend the meaning of starvation. It is only when you suffer that you really understand. As to anyone who has not endured privation having any notion of the matter, it is simply absurd. With us, after a long fast, some mouthfuls of bread and meat, a little mouldy biscuit, and salt beef triumphed over all our previous gloomy and saturnine thoughts. Nevertheless, after this repast, each gave way to his own reflections. I wondered what were those of Hans, the man of the extreme north, who was yet gifted with the fatalistic resignation of Oriental character, but the utmost stretch of the imagination would not allow me to realize the truth. As for my individual self, my thoughts had ceased to be anything but memories of the past, and were all connected with that upper world which I never should have left. I saw it all now, the beautiful house in the Königstrasse, my poor Gretchen, the good Martha. They all passed before my mind like visions of the past. Every time any of the lugubrious groanings which were to be distinguished in the hollows around fell upon my ears, I fancied I heard the distant murmur of the great cities above my head. As for my uncle, always thinking of his science, he examined the nature of the shaft by means of a torch. He closely examined the different strata one above the other, in order to recognize his situation by geological theory. This calculation, or rather this estimation, could by no means be anything but approximate. But a learned man, a philosopher, is nothing if not a philosopher when he keeps his ideas calm and collected, and certainly the professor possessed this quality to perfection. I heard him, as I sat in silence, murmuring words of geological science. As I understood his object and his meaning, I could not but interest myself despite my preoccupation in that terrible hour. Eruptive granite, he said to himself, we are still in the primitive epoch, but we are going up, still going up. But who knows, who knows? Then he still hoped. He felt along the vertical sides of the shaft with his hand, and some few minutes later he would go on again in the following style. This is nice. This is mica schist, silicious mineral. Good again. This is the epoch of transition. At all events, we are close to them. And then, what could the professor mean? Could he, by any conceivable means, measure the thickness of the crust of the earth suspended above our heads? Did he possess any possible means of making any approximation to this calculation? No. The manometer was wanting, and no summary estimation could take the place of it. And yet, as we progressed, the temperature increased in the most extraordinary degree, and I began to feel as if I were bathed in a hot and burning atmosphere. Never before had I felt anything like it. I could only compare it to the hot vapor from an iron foundry, when the liquid iron is in a state of ebullition and runs over. By degrees, and one after the other, Hans, my uncle, and myself had taken off our coats and waistcoats. They were unbearable. Even the slightest garment was not only uncomfortable, but the cause of extreme suffering. Are we ascending to a living fire? I cried, when to my horror and astonishment the heat became greater than before. No, no, said my uncle, it is simply impossible, quite impossible. And yet, said I, touching the side of the shaft with my naked hand, this wall is literally burning. At this moment, feeling as I did that the sides of this extraordinary wall were red hot, I plunged my hands into the water to cool them. I drew them back with a cry of despair. The water is boiling, I cried. My uncle, the professor, made no reply other than a gesture of rage and despair. Something very like the truth had probably struck his imagination, but I could take no share in either what was going on or in his speculations. An invincible dread had taken possession of my brain and soul. I could only look forward to an immediate catastrophe, such a catastrophe as not even the most vivid imagination could have thought of. An idea, at first vague and uncertain, was gradually being changed into certainty. I tremulously rejected it at first, but it forced itself upon me by degrees with extreme obstinacy. It was so terrible an idea that I scarcely dared to whisper it to myself, and yet all the while certain, and as it were, involuntary observations determined my convictions. By the doubtful glare of the torch, I could make out some singular changes in the granitic strata. A strange and terrible phenomenon was about to be produced, in which electricity played a part. Then this boiling water, this terrible and excessive heat. I determined as a last resource to examine the compass. The compass had gone mad. Yes, wholly stark staring mad. The needle jumped from pole to pole with sudden and surprising jerks, ran round, or as it is said, boxed the compass, and then ran suddenly back again as if it had the vertigo. I was aware that, according to the best acknowledged theories, it was a received notion that the mineral crust of the globe is never, and never has been, in a state of complete repose. It is perpetually undergoing the modifications caused by the decomposition of internal matter, the agitation consequent on the flowing of extensive liquid currents, the excessive action of magnetism which tends to shake it incessantly, at a time when even the multitudinous beings on its surface do not suspect the seething process to be going on. Still, this phenomenon would not have alarmed me alone. It would not have aroused in my mind a terrible and awful idea. But other facts could not allow my self-delusion to last. Terrible detonations, like heaven's artillery, began to multiply themselves with fearful intensity. I could only compare them with the noise made by hundreds of heavily laden chariots being madly driven over a stone pavement. It was a continuous roll of heavy thunder. And then the mad compass, shaken by the wild electric phenomena, confirmed me in my rapidly formed opinion. The mineral crust was about to burst, the heavy granite masses were about to rejoin, the fissure was about to close, the void was about to be filled up, and we poor atoms to be crushed in its awful embrace. "Uncle, uncle," I cried, "we are wholly, irretrievably lost." "What then, my young friend, is your new cause of terror and alarm?" he said in his calmest manner. "What fear you now?" "What do I fear now?" I cried in fierce and angry tones. "Do you not see that the walls of the shaft are in motion? Do you not see that the solid granite masses are cracking? Do you not feel the terrible, torrid heat? Do you not observe the awful boiling water on which we float? Do you not remark this mad needle, every sign and portent of an awful earthquake?" My uncle coolly shook his head. "An earthquake," he replied in the most calm and provoking tone. "Yes, my nephew, I tell you that you are utterly mistaken," he continued. Can you not recognize all the well-known symptoms of an earthquake? By no means. I am expecting something far more important. My brain is strained beyond endurance. What do you mean?" I cried. "An eruption, Harry." "An eruption," I gasped. "We are, then, in the volcanic shaft of a crater in full action and vigor." "I have every reason to think so," said the professor in a smiling tone, "and I beg to tell you that it is the most fortunate thing that could happen to us. The most fortunate thing." Had my uncle really and truly gone mad? What did he mean by these awful words? What did he mean by this terrible calm, this solemn smile? "What?" cried I, in the height of my exasperation. "We are on the way to an eruption, are we? Fatality has cast us into a well of burning and boiling lava, of rocks on fire, of boiling water, in a word, filled with every kind of eruptive matter. We are about to be expelled, thrown up, vomited, spit out of the interior of the earth, in common with huge blocks of granite. with showers of cinders and scoriae, in a wild whirlwind of flame. And you say, the most fortunate thing which could happen to us. Yes, replied the professor, looking at me calmly from under his spectacles. It is the only chance which remains to us of ever escaping from the interior of the earth to the light of day. It is quite impossible that I can put on paper the thousand strange, wild thoughts which followed this extraordinary announcement. But my uncle was right, quite right, and never had he appeared to me so audacious and so convinced as when he looked me calmly in the face and spoke of the chances of an eruption, of our being cast upon Mother Earth once more through the gaping crater of a volcano. Nevertheless, while we were speaking, we were still ascending. We passed the whole night going up, or to speak more scientifically, in an ascensional motion. The fearful noise redoubled. I was ready to suffocate. I seriously believed that my last hour was approaching, and yet, so strange is imagination, all I thought of was some childish hypothesis or other. In such circumstances, you do not choose your own thoughts. They overcome you. It was quite evident that we were being cast upwards by eruptive matter. Under the raft there was a mass of boiling water, and under this was a heavier mass of lava, and an aggregate of rocks which, on reaching the summit of the water, would be dispersed in every direction. That we were inside the chimney of a volcano, there could no longer be the shadow of a doubt. Nothing more terrible could be conceived. But on this occasion, instead of Sneffels, an old and extinct volcano, we were inside a mountain of fire in full activity. Several times I found myself asking what mountain was it, and on what part of the world we should be shot out. As if it were of any consequence. In the northern regions, there could be no reasonable doubt about that. Before it went decidedly mad, the compass had never made the slightest mistake. From the Cape of Saknussemm, we had been swept away to the northward many hundreds of leagues. Now the question was, were we once more under Iceland? Should we be belched forth onto the earth through the crater of Mount Hecla, or should we reappear through one of the other 7 fire funnels of the island, taking in my mental vision a radius of 500 leagues to the westward? I could see under this parallel only the little-known volcanoes of the northwest coast of America. To the east one only existed somewhere about the 80th degree of latitude, the Esk, upon the island of Jan Mayen, not far from the frozen regions of Spitzbergen. It was not craters that were wanting, and many of them were big enough to vomit a whole army. All I wished to know was the particular one towards which we were making with such fearful velocity. I often think now of my folly, as if I should ever have expected to escape. Towards morning, the ascending motion became greater and greater. If the degree of heat increased instead of decreasing as we approached the surface of the earth, it was simply because the causes were local and wholly due to volcanic influence. Our very style of locomotion left in my mind no doubt upon the subject. An enormous force, a force of several hundreds of atmospheres produced by the vapors accumulated and long compressed in the interior of the earth, was hoisting us upwards with irresistible power. But though we were approaching the light of day, to what fearful dangers were we about to be exposed? Instant death appeared the only fate which we could expect or contemplate. Soon a dim, sepulchral light penetrated the vertical gallery, which became wider and wider. I could make out to the right and left long, dark corridors like immense tunnels, from which awful and horrid vapors poured out. Tongues of fire, sparkling and crackling, appeared about to lick us up. The hour had come. "Look, uncle, look," I cried. "Well, what you see are the great sulphurous flames, nothing more common in connection with an eruption." "But if they lap us round," I angrily replied. "They will not lap us round," was his quiet and serene answer. "But it will be all the same in the end if they stifle us," I cried. "We shall not be stifled. The gallery is rapidly becoming wider and wider, and if it be necessary, we will presently leave the raft and take refuge in some fissure in the rock. But the water, which is continually ascending, I despairingly replied. There is no longer any water, Harry, he answered, but a kind of lava paste, which is heaving us up, in company with itself, to the mouth of the crater. In truth, the liquid column of water had wholly disappeared to give place to dense masses of boiling eruptive matter. The temperature was becoming utterly insupportable, and a thermometer exposed to this atmosphere would have marked between 189 and 190 degrees Fahrenheit. Perspiration rushed from every pore. But for the extraordinary rapidity of our ascent, we should have been stifled. Nevertheless, the professor did not carry out his proposition of abandoning the raft, and he did quite wisely. Those few ill-joined beams offered, anyway, a solid surface, a support which elsewhere must have utterly failed us. Towards 8 o'clock in the morning, a new incident startled us. The ascensional movement suddenly ceased. The raft became still and motionless. "What is the matter now?" I said, querulously, very much startled by this change. "A simple halt," replied my uncle. "Is the eruption about to fail?" I asked. "I hope not." Without making any reply, I rose. I tried to look around me. Perhaps the raft, checked by some projecting rock, opposed a momentary resistance to the eruptive mass. In this case, it was absolutely necessary to release it as quickly as possible. Nothing of the kind had occurred. The column of cinders, of scoriae, of broken rocks and earth had wholly ceased to ascend. "I tell you, uncle, that the eruption has stopped," was my oracular decision. "Ah," said my uncle, "you think so, my boy. You are wrong. Do not be in the least alarmed. This sudden moment of calm will not last long, be assured. It has already endured 5 minutes, and before we are many minutes older, we shall be continuing our journey to the mouth of the crater." All the time he was speaking, the professor continued to consult his chronometer, and he was probably right in his prognostics. Soon the raft resumed its motion in a very rapid and disorderly way, which lasted 2 minutes or thereabout, and then again it stopped as suddenly as before. "Good," said my uncle, observing the hour. "In 10 we shall start again." "In 10 minutes?" "Yes, precisely. We have to do with a volcano, the eruption of which is intermittent. We are compelled to breathe just as it does." Nothing could be more true. At the exact minute he had indicated, we were again launched on high with extreme rapidity. Not to be cast off the raft, it was necessary to hold on to the beams. Then the hoist again ceased. Many times since have I thought of this singular phenomenon without being able to find for it any satisfactory explanation. Nevertheless, it appeared quite clear to me that we were not in the principal chimney of the volcano, but in an accessory conduit, where we felt the counter-shock of the great and principal tunnel filled by burning lava. It is impossible for me to say how many times this maneuver was repeated. All that I can remember is that on every ascensional motion we were hoisted up with ever-increasing velocity, as if we had been launched from a huge projectile. During the sudden halts, we were nearly stifled. During the moments of projection, the hot air took away our breath. I thought for a moment of the voluptuous joy of suddenly finding myself in the Hyperborean regions with the cold 30 degrees below zero. My exalted imagination pictured to itself the vast, snowy plains of the Arctic regions, and I was impatient to roll myself on the icy carpet of the North Pole. By degrees my head, utterly overcome by a series of violent emotions, began to give way to hallucination. I was delirious. Had it not been for the powerful arms of Hans, the guide, I should have broken my head against the granite masses of the shaft. I have, in consequence, kept no account of what followed for many hours. I have a vague and confused remembrance of continual detonations, of the shaking of the huge granitic mass, and of the raft going round like a spinning top. It floated on the stream of hot lava, amidst a falling cloud of cinders. The huge flames roaring wrapped us around. A storm of wind, which appeared to be cast forth from an immense ventilator, roused up the interior fires of the earth. It was a hot, incandescent blast. At last I saw the figure of Hans, as if enveloped in the huge halo of burning blaze, and no other sense remained to me but that sinister dread which the condemned victim may be supposed to feel when led to the mouth of a cannon, at the supreme moment when the shot is fired, and his limbs are dispersed into empty space. Next chapter, chapter 43, Daylight at Last. When I opened my eyes, I felt the hand of the guide clutching me firmly by the belt. With his other hand, he supported my uncle. I was not grievously wounded, but bruised all over in the most remarkable manner. After a moment, I looked around, and found that I was lying down on the slope of a mountain not 2 yards from a yawning gulf into which I should have fallen had I made the slightest false step. Hans had saved me from death, while I rolled insensible on the flanks of the crater. "Where are we?" dreamily asked my uncle, who literally appeared to be disgusted at having returned to earth. The eider-down hunter simply shrugged his shoulders as a mark of total ignorance. "In Iceland," said I, not positively but interrogatively. "Nedge," said Hans. "How do you mean?" cried the professor. "No, what are your reasons?" "Hans is wrong," said I, rising. After all the innumerable surprises of this journey, a yet more singular one was reserved to us. I expected to see a cone covered by snow, by extensive and widespread glaciers, in the midst of the arid deserts of the extreme northern regions, beneath the full rays of a polar sky, beyond the highest latitudes. But contrary to all our expectations, I, my uncle, and the Icelander were cast upon the slope of a mountain calcined by the burning rays of a sun, which was literally baking us with its fires. I could not believe my eyes, but the actual heat which affected my body allowed me no chance of doubting. We came out of the crater half naked, and the radiant star from which we had asked nothing for 2 months was good enough to be prodigal to us of light and warmth. A light and warmth we could easily have dispensed with. When our eyes were accustomed to the light we had lost sight of so long, I used them to rectify the errors of my imagination. Whatever happened, we should have been at Spitzbergen, and I was in no humor to yield to anything but the most absolute proof. After some delay, the professor spoke. "Hem," he said, in a hesitating kind of way, "it really does not look like Iceland. But supposing it were the island of Jan Mayen," I ventured to observe. "Not in the least, my boy. This is not one of the volcanoes of the north, with its hills of granite and its crown of snow." "Nevertheless, look, my boy," said the professor, as dogmatically as usual. "Right above our heads, at a great height, opened the crater of a volcano from which escaped, from 1/4 of an hour to the other, with a very loud explosion, a lofty jet of flame mingled with pumice stone, cinders, and lava. I could feel the convulsions of nature in the mountain, which breathed like a huge whale, throwing up from time to time fire and air through its enormous vents. Below, and floating along a slope of considerable angularity, the stream of eruptive matter spread away to a depth which did not give the volcano a height of 300 fathoms. Its base disappeared in a perfect forest of green trees, among which I perceived olives, fig trees, and vines loaded with rich grapes. Certainly, this was not the ordinary aspect of the Arctic regions. About that there could not be the slightest doubt. When the eye was satisfied at its glimpse of this verdant expanse, it fell upon the waters of a lovely sea or beautiful lake, which made of this enchanted land an island of not many leagues in extent. On the side of the rising sun was to be seen a little port, crowded with houses, and near which the boats and vessels of peculiar build were floating upon azure waves. Beyond, groups of islands rose above the liquid plain, so numerous and close together as to resemble a vast beehive. Towards the setting sun, some distant shores were to be made out on the edge of the horizon. Some presented the appearance of blue mountains of harmonious conformation. Upon others, much more distant, there appeared a prodigiously lofty cone, above the summit of which hung dark and heavy clouds. Towards the north, an immense expanse of water sparkled beneath the solar rays, occasionally allowing the extremity of a mast or the convexity of a sail bellying to the wind to be seen. The unexpected character of such a scene added 100-fold to its marvelous beauties. "Where can we be?" I asked, speaking in a low and solemn voice. Hans shut his eyes with an air of indifference, and my uncle looked on without clearly understanding. "Whatever this mountain may be," he said at last, "I must confess it is rather warm. The explosions do not leave off, and I do not think it is worthwhile to have left the interior of a volcano and remain here to receive a huge piece of rock upon one's head. Let us carefully descend the mountain and discover the real state of the case. To confess the truth, I am dying of hunger and thirst." Decidedly, the professor was no longer a truly reflective character. For myself, forgetting all my necessities, ignoring my fatigues and sufferings, I should have remained still for several hours longer. But it was necessary to follow my companions. The slope of the volcano was very steep and slippery. We slid over piles of ashes, avoiding the streams of hot lava which glided about like fiery serpents. Still, while we were advancing, I spoke with extreme volubility, for my imagination was too full not to explode in words. "We are in Asia," I exclaimed. "We are on the coast of India, in the great Malay Islands, in the center of Oceania. We have crossed the one half of the globe to come out right at the antipodes of Europe." "But the compass," exclaimed my uncle. "Explain that to me." "Yes, the compass," I said with considerable hesitation. "I grant that is a difficulty. According to it, we have always been going northward." "Then it lied." To say it lied is rather a harsh word," was my answer. "Then we are at the North Pole." "The pole, no, well, I give it up," was my reply. The plain truth was that there was no explanation possible. I could make nothing of it, and all the while we were approaching this beautiful verdure, hunger and thirst tormented me fearfully. Happily, after 2 long hours' march, a beautiful country spread out before us, covered by olives, pomegranates, and vines, which appeared to belong to anybody and everybody. In any event, in the state of destitution into which we had fallen, we were not in a mood to ponder too scrupulously. What delight it was to press these delicious fruits to our lips, and to bite at grapes and pomegranates fresh from the vine. Not far off, near some fresh and mossy grass, under the delicious shade of some trees, I discovered a spring of fresh water, in which we voluptuously laved our faces, hands, and feet. While we were all giving way to the delights of new-found pleasures, a little child appeared between 2 tufted olive trees. "Ah!" cried I, "an inhabitant of this happy country." The little fellow was poorly dressed, weak and suffering, and appeared terribly alarmed at our appearance. Half naked, with tangled, matted, and ragged beards, we did look supremely ill-favored, and unless the country was a bandit land, we were not likely to alarm the inhabitants. Just as the boy was about to take to his heels, Hans ran after him and brought him back, despite his cries and kicks. My uncle tried to look as gentle as possible, and then spoke in German. "What is the name of this mountain, my friend?" The child made no reply. "Good," said my uncle, with a very positive air of conviction. "We are not in Germany." He then made the same demand in English, of which language he was an excellent scholar. The child shook its head and made no reply. I began to be considerably puzzled. "Is he dumb?" cried the professor, who was rather proud of his polyglot knowledge of languages, and made the same demand in French. The boy only stared in his face. "I must perforce try him in Italian," said my uncle with a shrug. "Dove noi siamo?" "Yes, tell me where we are," I added impatiently and eagerly. Again the boy remained silent. "My fine fellow, do you or do you not mean to speak?" cried my uncle, who began to get angry. He shook him and spoke another dialect of the Italian language. "Come si noma questa isola. What is the name of this island?" "Stromboli," replied the rickety little shepherd, dashing away from Hans and disappearing in the olive groves. We thought little enough about him. Stromboli. What effect on the imagination did these few words produce? We were in the center of the Mediterranean, amidst the eastern archipelago of mythological memory, in the ancient Strongyllos, where Aeolus kept the wind and the tempest chained up. And those blue mountains, which rose towards the rising sun, were the mountains of Calabria. And that mighty volcano which rose on the southern horizon was Etna, the fierce and celebrated Etna. Stromboli, Stromboli, I repeated to myself. My uncle played a regular accompaniment to my gestures and words. We were singing together like an ancient chorus. Ah, what a journey! What a marvelous and extraordinary journey! Here we had entered the earth by one volcano, and we had come out by another. And this other was situated more than 1,200 leagues from Sneffels, from that drear country of Iceland, cast away on the confines of the earth. The wondrous changes of this expedition had transporting us to the most harmonious and beautiful of earthly lands. We had abandoned the region of eternal snows for that of infinite verdure, and had left over our heads the grey fog of the icy regions to come back to the azure sky of Sicily. After a delicious repast of fruits and fresh water, we again continued our journey in order to reach the port of Stromboli. To say how we had reached the island would scarcely have been prudent. The superstitious character of the Italians would have been at work, and we should have been called demons vomited from the infernal regions. It was therefore necessary to pass for humble and unfortunate shipwrecked travellers. It was certainly less striking and romantic, but it was decidedly safer. As we advanced, I could hear my worthy uncle muttering to himself, "But the compass most certainly marked north. This is a fact I cannot explain in any way." "Well, the fact is," said I, with an air of disdain, "we must not explain anything. It will be much more easy. I should like to see a professor of the Johanneum Institution who is unable to explain a cosmic phenomenon. It would indeed be strange." And speaking thus, my uncle, half naked, his leathern purse round his loins, and his spectacles upon his nose, became once more the terrible professor of mineralogy. An hour after leaving the Wood of Olives, we reached the fort of San Vicenza, where Hans demanded the price of his 13th week of service. My uncle paid him with very many warm shakes of the hand. At that moment, if he did not indeed quite share our natural emotion, he allowed his feelings so far to give way as to indulge in an extraordinary expression for him. With the tips of 2 fingers, he gently pressed our hands and smiled. Next chapter, chapter 44. The journey ended. This is the final conclusion of a narrative which will be probably disbelieved even by people who are astonished at nothing. I am, however, armed at all points against human incredulity. We were kindly received by the Strombolite fishermen who treated us as shipwrecked travellers. They gave us clothes and food. After a delay of 48 hours, on the 30th of September, a little vessel took us to Messina, where a few days of delightful and complete repose restored us to ourselves. On Friday, the 4th of October, we embarked in the Volturn, one of the postal packets of the imperial messageries of France. And 3 days later we landed at Marseille, having no other care on our minds but that of our precious but erratic compass. This inexplicable circumstance tormented me terribly. On the 9th of October, in the evening, we reached Hamburg. What was the astonishment of Martha, what the joy of Gretchen? I will not attempt to define it. "Now then, Harry, that you really are a hero," she said. "There is no reason why you should ever leave me again." I looked at her. She was weeping tears of joy. I leave it to be imagined if the return of Professor Hardwigg made or did not make a sensation in Hamburg. Thanks to the indiscretion of Martha, the news of his departure for the interior of the earth had been spread over the whole world. No one would believe it, and when they saw him come back in safety, they believed it all the less. But the presence of Hans and many stray scraps of information by degrees modified public opinion. Then my uncle became a great man, and I the nephew of a great man, which, at all events, is something. Hamburg gave a festival in our honor. A public meeting of the Johanneum Institution was held, at which the professor related the whole story of his adventures, omitting only the facts in connection with the compass. That same day he deposited in the archives of the town the document he had found written by Saknussemm, and he expressed his great regret that circumstances, stronger than his will, did not allow him to follow the Icelandic traveller's track into the very center of the earth. He was modest in his glory, but his reputation only increased. So much honor necessarily created for him many envious enemies. Of course they existed, and as his theories, supported by certain facts, contradicted the system of science upon the question of central heat, he maintained his own views both with pen and speech against the learned of every country. Although I still believe in the theory of central heat, I confess that certain circumstances, hitherto very ill-defined, may modify the laws of such natural phenomena. At the moment when these questions were being discussed with interest, my uncle received a rude shock, one that he felt very much. Hans, despite everything he could say to the contrary, quitted Hamburg. The man to whom we owed so much would not allow us to pay our deep debt of gratitude. He was taken with nostalgia, a love for his Icelandic home. "Farvel," said he, one day, and with this one short word of adieu, he started for Reykjavik, which he soon reached in safety. We were deeply attached to our brave eiderduck hunter. His absence will never cause him to be forgotten by those whose lives he saved, and I hope, at some not distant day, to see him again. To conclude, I may say that our journey into the interior of the earth created an enormous sensation throughout the civilized world. It was translated and printed in many languages. All the leading journals published extracts from it, which were commentated, discussed, attacked, and supported with equal animation by those who believed in its episodes, and by those who were utterly incredulous. Wonderful! My uncle enjoyed during his lifetime all the glory he deserved, and he was even offered a large sum of money by Mr. Barnum to exhibit himself in the United States, while I am credibly informed by a traveller that he is to be seen in waxwork at Madame Tussaud's. But one care preyed upon his mind, a care which rendered him very unhappy. One fact remained inexplicable, that of the compass. For a learned man to be baffled by such an inexplicable phenomenon was very aggravating. But heaven was merciful, and in the end my uncle was happy. One day, while he put some minerals belonging to his collection in order, I fell upon the famous compass and examined it keenly. For 6 months it had lain unnoticed and untouched. I looked at it with curiosity, which soon became surprise. I gave a loud cry. The professor, who was at hand, soon joined me. "What is the matter?" he cried. "The compass. What then? Why, its needle points to the south and not to the north. My dear boy, you must be dreaming." I am not dreaming. See, the poles are changed. Changed. My uncle put on his spectacles, examined the instrument, and leaped with joy, shaking the whole house. A clear light fell upon our minds. "Here it is," he cried, as soon as he had recovered the use of his speech. After we had once passed Cape Saknussemm, the needle of this compass pointed to the southward instead of the northward. Evidently, our error is now easily explained. But to what phenomenon do we owe this alteration in the needle? Nothing more simple. Explain yourself, my boy. I am on thorns. During the storm, upon the central sea, the ball of fire which made a magnet of the iron in our raft turned our compass topsy-turvy. "Ah!" cried the professor, with a loud and ringing laugh. It was a trick of that inexplicable electricity. From that hour my uncle was the happiest of learned men, and I the happiest of ordinary mortals. For my pretty Verland girl, abdicating her position as ward, took her place in the house in the Königstrasse in the double quality of niece and wife. We need scarcely mention that her uncle was the illustrious Professor Hardwigg, corresponding member of all the scientific, geographical, mineralogical, and geological societies of the 5 parts of the globe. End of the voyage extraordinaire. End of the project GUTNBRG EBOOK. A Journey to the Center of the Earth updated editions will replace the previous one. The old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation and you can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules set forth in the general terms of use part of this license apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg trade mark electronic works to protect the Project GUTNBRGTM concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose, such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances, and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start. Full license, the full Project GUTNBRG license. Please read this before you distribute, or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works. By using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg, you agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark license, available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use and Redistributing Project Gutenberg Trade Mark Electronic Works 1A by reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg Trade Mark electronic work. You indicate that you have read, understand, agree to, and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark/copyright, agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg Trade Mark electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg Trade Mark electronic work, and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1E8. 1B. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works, even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works. See paragraph 1e below. 1c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the Foundation, or PGLAF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States, and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying, or creating derivative works based on the work, as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg trademark mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg trademark works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg trademark name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg trademark license when you share it without charge with others. 1d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing, or creating derivative works based on this work, or any other Project Gutenberg trademark work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1e. Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg. 1e1. The following sentence, with active links to or other immediate access to the full Project Gutenberg trademark license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg trademark work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied, or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away, or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1a2. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1e1 through 1e7 or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1e8 or 1e9. 1e3. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1e1 through 1e7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg trademark license for all works posted, with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1E4. Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg trademark license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work, or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg trademark. 1E5. Do not copy, display, perform, distribute, or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1E1 with active links or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg trademark license. 1E6. You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg trademark work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII, or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg trademark website, www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee, or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request of the work in its original, plain vanilla ASCII or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg trademark license as specified in paragraph 1E1. 1E7. Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying, or distributing any Project Gutenberg trademark works, unless you comply with paragraph 1E8 or 1E9. 1E8. You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or providing access to or distributing Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works, provided that you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg trademark works, calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing or by email within 30 days of receipt that he does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg trademark works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1F3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark works. 1E9. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the manager of the Project Gutenberg trademark. Contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. 1F1. Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg trademark collection. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works and the medium on which they may be stored may contain defects, such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus, or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1F2. Limited warranty. Disclaimer of DAMAGES. Except for the right of replacement or refund, described in paragraph 1F3. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty or breach of contract, except those provided in paragraph 1F3. You agree that the foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive, or incidental damages, even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1F3. Limited right of replacement or refund. If you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any, you paid for it, by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you received the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1F4. Except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1F3, this work is provided to you, as is, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1F5. Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1F6. Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion and distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg trademark work. B. Alteration, modification, or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg trademark work. And C. Any defect you cause. Section 2. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg trademark. Project Gutenberg trademark is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers, including obsolete, old, middle-aged, and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg Trademark S goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg Trademark Collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg trademark and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see sections 3 and 4 and the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. Section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a non-profit 501c3 educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The Foundation's EIN, or Federal Tax Identification Number, is 64-6,221,541. Contributions to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, UT 84116 015961887. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, Project Gutenberg trademark, depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form, accessible by the widest array of equipment, including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform, and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork, and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, we know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the Project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways, including checks, online payments, and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Section 5. General information about Project Gutenberg Trademark Electronic Works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg trademark concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg trademark ebooks with only a loose network of volunteer support. Project Gutenberg trademark ebooks are often created from several printed editions all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the US unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep ebooks in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg trademark, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new ebooks, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new ebooks the end. Thank you for joining me on this journey through a journey to the center of the earth. I hope you enjoyed the story and found it captivating. If you're hungry for more thrilling tales, explore more timeless literature in our curated public domain audiobook collection. Link in description. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss upcoming readings, and feel free to leave your suggestions or favorite titles in the comments. Stay tuned for the next story. Happy listening.